Earlier this year, hundreds of adult games were quietly removed from Steam. The reason? Pressure from credit card companies and payment processors. Pressure that came in part from an activist group called Collective Shout. They targeted both the payment networks and Valve itself, accusing Steam of hosting games that were harmful to women and girls. And now, after weeks of backlash, Visa has finally responded. Their explanation? We don't make moral judgments, this was just about safety. But let's be honest. Whether you pulled the trigger yourself or let someone else force your hand, it's still on you. And from the gamer's perspective, it doesn't matter if it was your judgment or someone else's. You caved. So let's take a closer look at what Visa said and why their defense doesn't hold up. After the games were pulled and backlash started building, some people reached out to Visa directly, and Visa responded. But they didn't release a press conference and they didn't publish an official statement. Instead, they sent what appears to be a form letter, a generic response quietly handed out to anyone who asked why certain games had vanished from Steam. Here's the important bit. Quote, "While we explicitly prohibit illegal activity on our network, we are equally committed to protecting legal commerce. If a transaction is legal, our policy is to process the transaction. We do not make moral judgments on legal purchases made by consumers." Close quote. But all this statement really does is deflect responsibility. They're not denying what happened. They're not even claiming the games were illegal. They're just hiding behind vague language. But that doesn't change the outcome. At the end of the day, they are the link in the chain being exploited to quietly ban legal expression. And the moment we let that slide, we hand over the power to decide what can exist online. Not to lawmakers, not to courts, but to corporations. Visa says they don't make moral judgments, but in practice, they don't have to, because the threat of financial exclusion does it for them. If a developer knows that payment processors might cut them off, they'll self-censor before the card companies even have to lift a finger. It's a kind of soft censorship, one that doesn't require laws or court orders, just corporate pressure and plausible deniability. As it stands now, no one is accountable. Not the activists who applied the pressure, not the payment processors who quietly gave in, not the platforms that enforced the bans. Everyone just shrugs and says, "It's not our call." But the end result is the same. Legal content disappears, and no one has to take the blame. But this isn't like being banned from your local bookstore or even a social media site. We're not talking about audience or reach. We're talking about the ability to get paid, the ability to participate in the economy. Sure, you can build a website, you can make your own game, you can even find an audience. But without Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, or Stripe, you can't sell it. They're not just middlemen, they're the choke point. And when they say we're not making moral decisions while enforcing the moral demands of activist groups, that's a lie of omission. They may not be the source of the pressure, but they're the tool being used to apply it. And if we accept that, if we let it slide just because it's something we don't care about, then we've already lost the argument when it is something we care about. Because the right question isn't, do I agree with what was censored? The question is, who gets to decide what is allowed? And if the answer is Visa, we've taken a wrong turn somewhere. This entire debacle demonstrates why it's so important to support freedom of expression. The sad reality is that a lot of people are fine with this kind of censorship, right up until it hits something they care about. When Collective Shout first started pressuring platforms and payment processors, plenty of people cheered them on. After all, they were going after problematic games, stuff that made them uncomfortable, so it was justified. But fast forward a bit, and now games marked as LGBT are being removed as well. And suddenly the same people who applauded Collective Shout for protecting women are outraged. because now the target has shifted. And that's exactly the problem. Defending free expression doesn't mean defending what you like. If it means anything, it means defending what you don't. Because if you only stand up when your side gets hit, you're not fighting for principle, you're just fighting for control. It's easy to cheer when something you dislike is banned. But if you only value free expression when it's something you like, then you don't value free expression, just convenience. This is why we need real laws. Laws that stop credit card companies and payment processors from acting as unelected moral regulators. Right now, these companies operate in a legal gray zone. They're not government actors, so they're not bound by the First Amendment. But they're not neutral either, not when they control who gets paid and who doesn't. Visa can say they don't make moral judgments all they want, but if they're still cutting off payment access based on vague terms like brand harm or safety risk, then they're still deciding who gets to participate in the marketplace. And that's a power no private company should have, especially not when they can be pressured into action by third-party activists who face no accountability of their own. Because this isn't just about video games. It's about books, art, journalism, independent creators. Any domain where your ability to make a living depends on whether a handful of financial gatekeepers approve of your content. It's not enough to say, well, just go somewhere else. There is nowhere else. Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Stripe, these companies are the economy. If they shut you out, it doesn't matter how legal your content is, you're done. That's why we need legislation that prohibits financial deplatforming unless the content is demonstrably illegal or directly tied to criminal activity. Not unsafe, not bad for the brand, not we got a complaint. Illegal or not. That's the only standard that makes sense in a free society. Because if we let credit card companies decide which games can exist, it's only a matter of time before they decide which books can be printed, which opinions can be published, and which voices get to speak at all. Of course, laws take time. But if you want to take action right now, I encourage you to sign this petition on change.org. Tell MasterCard, Visa, and activist groups, stop controlling what we can watch, read, or play. The link is in the description below. And please, don't stop there. Call, email, let Visa, MasterCard, and other payment processors know that we're watching. These companies tend to follow the loudest voice in the room, so we need to make sure that voice is ours.